I was driving to hear my son's will when a neighbor ran up and shouted, "Don't start the engine!" He told me the terrible truth about my daughter-in-law. His words sent a chill down my spine, but when I finally arrived at the will reading, she fainted when she saw me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Seth, don't start that engine. My hand froze on the car door handle. Garrett's voice cut through the peaceful morning air like a knife through silk. I turned to see my neighbor sprinting across his perfectly manicured lawn, still in his bathrobe and slippers, panic etched across his weathered face. I had been adjusting my black tie in the rearview mirror moments before preparing mentally for the will reading. Martin's will, my son's final words to this world. The formal suit felt heavy on my shoulders, like armor for a battle I never wanted to fight. What's wrong, Garrett? I stepped back from the sedan, keys trembling slightly in my grip. He reached my driveway, breathing hard. Last night at 11:30, I saw Helen by your car. She had tools working under the hood for 15 minutes straight. His retired policeman instincts were firing on all cylinders. When she spotted me watching from my bedroom window, she slammed the hood shut and ran. The garage suddenly felt colder. Helen, my daughter-in-law, the woman who would inherit $40 million today if everything went according to her plan. I glanced at my sedan, the same car I'd driven reliably for 8 years. You're certain it was Helen? Absolutely. She parked her BMW on the street, not in your driveway. Deliberate stealth. Garrett's eyes narrowed. Seth, I've seen enough crime scenes to know when something's wrong. Don't drive anywhere until you get that car checked. I walked around the vehicle slowly, examining the exterior. No obvious scratches or damage. But then again, Helen wasn't stupid. She had been married to my brilliant son long enough to learn about precision work. The morning sun streamed through the garage opening, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny witnesses to whatever had transpired here in darkness. Birds chirped in the oak trees lining our quiet suburban street, oblivious to the deadly game unfolding beneath their branches. My engineering mind began calculating possibilities. Brake lines, steering mechanisms, engine sabotage. Any of those could cause a fatal accident on the highway to downtown Chicago. An accident that would leave Helen as the sole beneficiary of Martin's cybersecurity fortune. Thank you, Garrett. You may have just saved my life. He nodded grimly. What's your next move? I pulled out my phone with steady hands, scrolling to Tom Riley's number. If anyone could find evidence of tampering, it would be him. 20 years of automotive experience and an eye for detail that rivaled a forensic investigator. I'm calling my mechanic professional inspection. I met Garrett's concerned gaze. If Helen thinks she can eliminate the only person standing between her and Martin's money, she's about to discover how wrong she is. The phone felt warm against my palm as I prepared to dial. Whatever Helen had done to my car, I would find proof, and then I would make sure justice prevailed. Not just for my safety, but for my son's memory. Tom answered on the second ring. Riley's garage. This is Tom speaking. Tom, this is Seth Jordan. I need you at my house immediately. I suspect my car has been sabotaged. A pause. Then that's serious business, Seth. Don't touch anything. I'll be there in 15 minutes with my full diagnostic kit. I hung up and began pacing the garage, my dress shoes clicking against the concrete floor. 15 minutes to wait. 15 minutes to study every inch of my sedan without disturbing potential evidence. The car sat innocently in the dim garage light, its dark blue paint gleaming. How many times had I performed routine maintenance on this exact spot? Changed oil, rotated tires, replaced air filters. Now it might be harboring something designed to kill me. Helen's face flashed in my memory, her perfectly applied makeup at Martin's funeral. Tears that seemed more performance than genuine grief. She'd inherited my son's charm, but none of his integrity. $40 million was a powerful motive for murder. I checked my watch. 10 minutes remaining. The sound of a diesel engine rumbling up my driveway interrupted my thoughts. Tom's service van emblazed with Riley's automotive honest work, fair prices in bold green letters, parked behind my sedan. Tom emerged carrying a substantial toolbox, his Irish accent thick with concern. "Right, Seth? Tell me everything while I set up." "My neighbor witnessed my daughter-in-law tampering with this vehicle last night. She's the primary beneficiary of a substantial inheritance, and I'm the only obstacle remaining." Tom's expression darkened as he activated the hydraulic lift built into my garage floor. "My money makes people do terrible things. Let's see what we're dealing with." The sedan rose slowly, revealing its undercarriage like a patient on an operating table. Tom grabbed a high-powered flashlight and began his methodical examination, starting with the brake system. "Someone's been here." "All right." His voice carried a professional edge I'd never heard before. "These cuts on the brake lines, they're clean, precise, not accidental damage from road debris." I leaned closer, squinting at the components he illuminated. "How can you be certain?" 20 years in this business, Seth. Natural wear creates jagged edges, fraying. This is deliberate. Surgical cuts designed to fail gradually." He traced the damaged lines with his finger, careful not to disturb them. "Whoever did this knows automotive systems. The cuts are positioned to cause complete brake failure after several miles of driving." My blood ran cold. Several miles would put me on the expressway, traveling 70 miles per hour toward downtown Chicago. No brakes at that speed meant certain death. Professional work, then? Absolutely. And there's more. Tom moved to examine the steering components. "Loosened tie rod ends here. Your steering would become increasingly unstable as you drove." The pieces fell into place with terrifying clarity. Helen hadn't simply wanted me dead. She'd wanted it to appear accidental. A tragic automotive failure claiming the life of an elderly man still grieving his son's death. I pulled out my phone to call a taxi. "Tom, continue your inspection and document everything. I need photographs of all damage already on it. This evidence needs to reach the police first. I have a will reading to attend. Helen expects me to die on the way there. Instead, I'm going to watch her face when I walk through that conference room door." The taxi pulled up as Tom finished photographing the sabotage evidence. I slid into the back seat, briefcase in hand, my formal attire now feeling like battle armor. "Downtown law firm on LaSalle Street," I told the driver, providing the exact address. "Important meeting." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror as we pulled away from my suburban neighborhood, the most important of my life. As we transitioned from quiet residential streets to busy thoroughfares, I allowed myself to process the full scope of Helen's plan. She'd calculated everything: the timing, the method, the appearance of accident. $40 million represented freedom from financial worry for multiple lifetimes. Martin had built his cybersecurity company from nothing, developing revolutionary software that protected major corporations from cyber attacks. Banking giants, healthcare systems, government contractors, they all relied on my son's innovations. Within 5 years, he'd transformed from struggling entrepreneur to multimillionaire. The irony wasn't lost on me. Martin had dedicated his life to protecting others from digital threats, never suspecting the greatest danger would come from the woman sharing his bed. Traffic thickened as we approached the Chicago Loop. Glass towers stretched toward gray clouds, their windows reflecting the morning sun like 1,000 eyes watching our progress. The taxi wove between delivery trucks and commuter vehicles, each mile taking me closer to confrontation. Helen would be sitting in that conference room right now, probably checking her watch, wondering why I hadn't arrived yet. In her mind, I should be dying in twisted metal on some highway, clearing her path to uncontested wealth. $40 million, I whispered to myself. Enough to kill for. But she'd underestimated the bonds of neighborhood friendship. Garrett's vigilance had saved my life and exposed her murderous intent. Now, instead of inheriting everything, she would face justice for attempted murder. The taxi turned onto LaSalle Street, heading toward the gleaming tower housing Reynolds, Mitchell, and Associates. Through the windows, I could see other formally dressed people entering the building: lawyers, executives, people whose lives revolved around money and power. Martin had been different. Even as his wealth grew, he'd remained grounded, visiting regularly, sharing his excitement about new security protocols and client successes. He'd worked 18-hour days, not from greed, but from genuine passion for protecting others. Helen had never understood that drive. She saw only the financial results: expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, designer clothing. When Martin became ill, her concern had been performative, her grief calculated. "Here we are, sir. That'll be $43. I handed him 50 and stepped onto the sidewalk, looking up at the imposing structure before me. Somewhere inside, Helen was waiting, confident in her scheme's success. She was about to discover that Seth Jordan wasn't so easily eliminated. Walking through the revolving door, I felt my son's presence like a guiding hand on my shoulder. Today, justice would prevail. Today, Martin's legacy would be protected from the woman who'd betrayed his trust and threatened his father's life. The elevator doors opened before me like gates to a battlefield I was finally ready to enter. Downtown Chicago rose around the taxi like a concrete forest, each glass tower reflecting fragments of morning light. I settled deeper into the worn leather seat, pulling out my phone to review the medical documents I'd photographed weeks ago. Martin's health records told a disturbing story. March 28th, first complaint of fatigue and stomach discomfort. April 2nd, severe nausea, rapid weight loss. April 18th, dead. 3 weeks. Healthy 42-year-old men didn't simply waste away in 3 weeks. I scrolled through the chronology, my engineer's mind cataloging inconsistencies. Martin had always been meticulous about his health: regular checkups, exercise routine, preventive care. The medical timeline made no sense. Unknown gastrointestinal complications. The death certificate read unknown, as if modern medicine couldn't identify what killed a previously healthy man in the prime of his life. Helen had controlled every aspect of his medical care. She'd insisted on specific doctors, private treatment facilities, limited visiting hours. Even I, his father, had been restricted to brief, supervised visits during his final days. My phone buzzed with a text message from that final week. "Dad, if something happens to me, be careful with Helen." I dismissed it as morphine-induced paranoia. Terminal patients often developed suspicious thoughts about caregivers. But now, with brake lines severed in my garage, Martin's warning carried deadly weight. The taxi wove through downtown traffic, passing familiar landmarks that seemed foreign now. Everything looked different when viewed through the lens of murder. Martin's cybersecurity company had made him wealthy beyond imagination. Government contracts, banking security, healthcare protection systems. His software safeguarded billions of dollars in digital assets. Helen had married into that fortune, but she'd never understood the work behind it. To her, Martin was a money-generating machine, not a brilliant innovator protecting people from digital predators. When that machine showed signs of breaking down, she'd simply expedited the process. The medical records revealed another troubling pattern. Martin's regular physician had been mysteriously unavailable during the critical period. Helen had insisted on a replacement doctor, someone with impressive credentials, but no previous relationship with my son. Experimental treatment, she had called it. Cutting-edge therapy for rare conditions. Cutting-edge therapy that had accelerated his decline rather than stopping it. I closed the medical files and stared out at the approaching law firm building. Somewhere in that tower, Helen was waiting to collect her reward for 3 weeks of careful poisoning, followed by attempted murder of the primary witness. She'd underestimated the bonds of neighborhood friendship and a father's determination to protect his son's legacy. Today, her calculated plan would unravel in the most public way possible. The taxi slowed as we approached the gleaming office tower. Time to face the woman who'd killed my son and tried to kill me. Time to ensure justice prevailed over greed. Martin's final warning echoed in my mind as I prepared to exit the vehicle. This time, I was listening. The elevator carried me to the 47th floor with mechanical precision, each ascending floor marking another step toward confrontation. Reynolds, Mitchell and Associates occupied prime real estate. Panoramic views of Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors that reflected expensive lighting fixtures, leather furniture that whispered of wealth and power. Helen sat in a burgundy armchair near the reception desk, casually flipping through a luxury lifestyle magazine. She wore a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves that framed her carefully made-up face. She looked up as I approached, and I watched the color drain from her features like water from a broken glass. The magazine slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the marble floor. "Hello, Helen." I kept my voice level, professional, surprised to see me alive. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly before she managed to speak. "Seth, I thought you weren't coming." "Really? That's interesting." I moved closer, noting how her hands trembled as she gripped the chair arms. "Why would you think that?" "Perhaps because of what you were doing by my car last night around 11:30. "I don't know what you're talking about." The words came out too quickly, too sharp. Guilty people always protested too much. Garrett saw everything, Helen. The tools you brought, the time you spent working under my hood, the way you ran when you spotted him watching from his window. She stood abruptly, trying to use height to regain psychological advantage. "That's ridiculous. Why would I—" "The same reason you killed my son." The accusation hung in the air between us like a blade. Helen's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath the widow's grief performance. Other clients moved through the reception area, their conversations creating a background hum that provided cover for our deadly serious exchange. The professional setting constrained us both. No dramatic confrontations in this temple of legal propriety. "You're obviously distraught," Helen said, recovering her composure with practiced ease. "Grief can make people imagine things that aren't there. Can it make brake lines cut themselves? Can it cause steering components to mysteriously loosen overnight?" Her jaw tightened. "I have no idea what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts documented by a professional mechanic with 20 years of experience." Helen's eyes darted toward the conference room where the will reading would take place, then back to me. I could see her mind working, calculating new angles of attack. "You know what your problem is, Seth?" Her voice turned venomous. "You never accepted that Martin chose me over your narrow little world. He loved me, not you. He warned me about you before he died. I should have listened. He was delirious from medication. Terminal patients say all sorts of things." The receptionist glanced in our direction, sensing tension despite our lowered voices. Helen noticed and forced a smile, playing the role of grieving widow meeting with a concerned father-in-law. But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the predatory assessment of how much damage this confrontation might cause to her plans. She was already planning her next move, ready to deploy whatever weapons remained in her arsenal. The conference room beckoned behind frosted glass doors where lawyers waited with documents that would determine the distribution of $40 million. Helen thought she knew how this story ended. She was about to discover how wrong she could be. Helen moved toward the panoramic windows overlooking Lake Michigan, using the spectacular view as a backdrop for what she clearly believed would be her moment of triumph. The morning sun cast long shadows across the reception area, and she positioned herself where the light would frame her like a portrait of victory. "You know what, Seth?" Her voice carried a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "None of this matters. Martin left me everything. $40 million. Every single penny." She turned to face me. Her expression transformed from defensive fear to cold satisfaction. "And you? You get absolutely nothing." "We'll see about that." "Oh, I've already seen." Helen's smile turned predatory. "I was his wife. I took care of him through sickness and health, for better or worse, until death did us part." "Yes, you took care of him very thoroughly." The barb rolled off her like water from expensive silk. She was too intoxicated by anticipated wealth to register the accusation's full meaning. "I have lawyers, Seth, the best money can buy. You can contest this will all you want, but spousal inheritance rights are absolute in Illinois." She gestured toward the lake view as if it already belonged to her. "Do you see that penthouse development on the shoreline? I've already placed a deposit on the corner unit." The casual revelation of her spending plans struck me like a physical blow. Martin wasn't even buried 3 weeks, and she was already shopping for luxury real estate with his money. $40 million buys a lot of freedom, she continued, warming to her topic. Travel, shopping, the finest restaurants, I'll finally live the life I deserve instead of playing nursemaid to a sick man. Her words revealed the depth of her callousness. No grief for a lost husband, no acknowledgement of a life cut short, only materialistic calculations about how to spend blood money most efficiently. Martin worked 18-hour days building that company, I said quietly. He revolutionized cybersecurity, protected millions of people from digital threats. That fortune represents years of innovation and dedication, and now it's mine. Helen's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who believed she'd outmaneuvered everyone around her. You always disapproved of me, Seth. Thought I wasn't good enough for your precious son. Well, guess what? I win. Other clients in the reception area began taking notice of our conversation, though Helen seemed oblivious to the attention. Her anticipated victory had made her reckless, willing to display her true nature in public. You have no idea what Martin was really worth, do you? I asked. 40 million, I know exactly what he was worth. And I have truth. Helen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Truth doesn't pay for penthouse apartments or European vacations. Money does. And in about 10 minutes, I'll have all the money I could ever need. She moved closer, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for me. You want to know a secret, Seth? Martin never loved you as much as you think. He complained about your interference constantly, said you were a bitter old man who couldn't accept that he'd moved on with his life. The lie was designed to wound, to break my spirit before the final legal blow. But Helen had miscalculated. Instead of devastating me, her cruelty only strengthened my resolve. Mrs. Jordan, Mr. Jordan, the receptionist's voice cut through our confrontation. Mr. Reynolds is ready for you in conference room A. Helen straightened her designer dress and checked her reflection in the window. Time for the main event. She walked toward the conference room with the confident stride of someone absolutely certain of victory. Her expensive heels clicked against marble floors like a countdown to triumph. I followed at a measured pace, my own steps steady and deliberate. Helen believed she was walking toward wealth and freedom. She was actually walking toward the complete destruction of everything she'd schemed to achieve. Mrs. Jordan, Mr. Jordan, the receptionist gestured toward a mahogany door marked with a brass nameplate reading Edward Reynolds, senior partner. Please follow me. Edward's private office commanded an impressive view of Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. Leather-bound legal volumes lined the walls, and his massive desk bore the weight of what appeared to be substantial documentation. He stood as we entered, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. Please take seats at the conference table. Edward's voice carried the measured authority of someone who'd overseen countless estate readings. Before we begin, I must verify identities and review the proper legal protocols. Helen chose the chair facing the window, positioning herself where the natural light would frame her expected moment of triumph. I sat across from her, noting how she had arranged her designer purse and removed her smartphone, apparently preparing to document her windfall. The last will and testament of Martin Jordan, properly executed and notarized on April 1st, 2025. Edward opened an official-looking folder with practiced precision. All legal requirements have been satisfied, including 3 independent witnesses and state certification. April 1st, 2 weeks before Martin's death, he'd been weak but mentally sharp, still capable of making crucial decisions about his legacy. Martin was very specific about his intentions, Edward continued, adjusting his reading glasses. He wanted to ensure his father's welfare above all other considerations. Helen's confident smile never wavered. She probably assumed this meant a generous provision for my retirement while she claimed the bulk of the estate. I quote directly from the document, Edward said. I hereby leave my entire estate, valued at approximately $40 million, including all assets, properties, investments, and business holdings, to my father, Seth Jordan, in recognition of his lifelong guidance and support. The words hit Helen like a physical blow. Her face went ashen, and she gripped the edge of the conference table as if the room had suddenly tilted. What? The word escaped her lips as barely a whisper. That's impossible. Edward continued reading with professional detachment. Furthermore, Martin included a personal addendum to be shared specifically with you, Seth. He withdrew a sealed envelope from the folder. In his own handwriting, Dad, be careful with Helen. I believe she may try to harm you to claim the inheritance. Trust your instincts about her true nature. The letter trembled in my hands as I read my son's final warning. He'd known. Despite his illness, despite Helen's careful performance, Martin had seen through her facade and taken steps to protect me. Helen stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. This can't be legal. I am his wife. Spousal inheritance rights are superseded by properly executed testamentary documents, Edward interrupted calmly. Illinois law permits testators to distribute their estates according to their wishes, provided all legal requirements are met. But $40 million, Helen's voice cracked with disbelief, goes entirely to Mr. Seth Jordan as clearly specified in multiple places throughout the document. I watched Helen's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. All her scheming, her calculated kindness during Martin's illness, her murderous plans, all rendered meaningless by my son's foresight and love. Helen's hands shook as she reached toward the documents, as if touching them might change their content. Her shock crystallized into pure rage. She shot up from her chair so violently it toppled backward, clattering against the polished hardwood floor. "This is impossible!" Her voice rose to a near shriek. "The will is forged. I'll prove it." Edward remained seated, his calm professionalism a stark contrast to her hysteria. The document was notarized and witnessed by 3 independent parties, including Martin's personal physician and longtime business associate. "I don't care!" Helen lunged across the conference table, her manicured fingers clawing toward the legal documents. "Give me those papers!" Edward smoothly gathered the documents and moved them beyond her reach. "Mrs. Jordan, please compose yourself. These are certified copies. The originals are secured in our vault." Helen's facade had completely shattered. Gone was the grieving widow, the concerned wife, the charming socialite. What remained was a desperate woman whose carefully laid plans had exploded in her face. "I'll contest this will. You'll never see a penny of that money." She whirled to face me, her eyes blazing with fury. "I spent 3 years married to your pathetic son. I earned that inheritance." "Earned it?" I stood slowly, my voice deadly quiet. "By poisoning him." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Helen's face went white, then flushed crimson as rage overtook shock. "You can't prove anything. Martin was sick." "Healthy men don't die in 3 weeks from unknown complications," I said coldly. "But you knew that, didn't you? You knew exactly what you were giving him." Helen grabbed for the documents again, this time managing to snatch 1 page before Edward could stop her. She began tearing at it frantically, but the heavy legal paper resisted her efforts. "This won't change anything," Edward said calmly, reaching for his desk phone. "As I mentioned, these are copies." "I want those originals!" Helen screamed, throwing the torn fragments at my feet. "I want every copy destroyed." "Security? Yes, this is Edward Reynolds in conference room A. I need assistance with an unstable client." Helen spun toward the door as if planning to escape, then back to the windows, trapped like a caged animal. The wealthy widow persona had been replaced by something feral and desperate. "You think you've won?" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "I'll fight this in court for years. I'll tie up every dollar until you're dead." "Run, Helen." I kept my voice steady, controlled. "Justice will catch up with you eventually." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, their presence immediately changing the room's dynamic. Edward gestured toward Helen with professional courtesy. "Please escort Mrs. Jordan from the building. She's no longer welcome in our offices." As the guards approached, Helen made one final, desperate grab for Edward's briefcase. But her expensive heels betrayed her balance. She stumbled, her dignity as shattered as her schemes. "This isn't over," she screamed, as the guards gently but firmly guided her toward the door. "I'll destroy all of you." The conference room fell silent except for the distant sound of Helen's protests echoing down the corridor. Edward straightened his tie and began gathering the scattered document fragments. "Well," he said with considerable understatement, "that could have gone more smoothly." I sank back into my chair, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. My son had protected me from beyond the grave, and Helen's true nature had been exposed for all to see. The war was far from over, but the first major battle belonged to justice. Edward closed the conference room door and returned to his desk, the professional calm settling back over his office like dust after a hurricane. He methodically arranged the scattered legal documents, his movements precise despite the chaos Helen had attempted to create. "I must apologize for that outburst," he said, straightening his jacket. "In 30 years of estate law, I've rarely witnessed such a violent reaction to testamentary proceedings." She expected to walk away with $40 million. I remained seated, processing the emotional whiplash of the last hour. That's a powerful motivation for delusion. My phone buzzed against the conference table. Tom Riley's name appeared on the screen, and I remembered his promise to complete his automotive investigation. Tom, what did you find? Seth, you need to hear this. His Irish accent carried urgency that made my pulse quicken. This wasn't just sabotage. This was attempted murder with professional-grade execution. Edward looked up from his document organization, clearly hearing both sides of the conversation in the quiet office. Explain exactly what you discovered. Your brake lines were cut with surgical precision, Tom said. Not random damage, not amateur work. The cuts were positioned to cause complete brake failure after approximately 10 miles of highway driving. 10 miles. Exactly the distance from my suburban home to the downtown expressway entrance, where I'd be traveling 70 miles per hour with no ability to stop. Are you absolutely certain this was deliberate? 100%. I've documented everything with photographs and measurements. The tools used were professional grade, and the technique shows advanced knowledge of brake system vulnerabilities. Edward leaned forward, his legal mind immediately grasping the implications. Tom, this is Edward Reynolds, Seth's attorney. Would you be willing to provide expert testimony about these findings? Absolutely. I've preserved all the evidence and prepared a detailed technical report. This kind of sabotage could only be performed by someone with specific automotive knowledge or someone with access to professionals who possess such knowledge. Helen's expensive lifestyle suggested connections to people willing to perform various services for the right compensation. There's more, Tom continued. The steering components were also compromised. Even if the brakes had functioned, the vehicle would have become increasingly unstable at highway speeds. Edward was already taking notes, his pen moving rapidly across a legal pad. We can use this evidence to support criminal charges for attempted murder. She killed my son and tried to kill me. The words came out flat, emotionless, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. Now she pays for both crimes. Tom's technical expertise had provided the final piece of evidence needed to build a comprehensive case against Helen. Combined with Martin's warning and her explosive reaction to the will reading, we had enough material to ensure she faced justice for her crimes. I'll contact the Cook County District Attorney's office immediately, Edward said, already reaching for his phone. Between the inheritance fraud attempt and documented evidence of attempted murder, Helen Jordan is going to face serious criminal charges. The afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows, casting long shadows across the scattered legal documents. Martin's foresight had protected his father's life and preserved his legacy for the causes he truly cared about. Helen's greed had finally met its match in a father's love and a son's wisdom. Justice was no longer just a hope. It was an imminent reality. The next morning brought clarity with the sunrise. With Martin's inheritance secured, I could focus entirely on ensuring Helen faced criminal consequences for her actions. My home office became a war room, documents spread across every surface like evidence in a detective thriller. Edward had recommended Marcus Chen, a private investigator with 20 years' experience in financial crime cases. We met that afternoon in a downtown coffee shop, his weathered face showing the kind of skepticism that came from seeing too much human greed. Mrs. Jordan has accumulated substantial credit card debt, Marcus reported 3 days later, sliding a manila folder across my kitchen table. Over $200,000 in the past 18 months. Luxury purchases, expensive restaurants, designer clothing, all charged while her husband was dying. The financial records painted a damning picture. Helen had been living far beyond their means, apparently confident that Martin's death would solve her money problems permanently. Dr. Sarah Williams, the medical expert Edward had consulted, arrived on the 4th day with her analysis of Martin's medical records. Her expression was grim as she spread laboratory reports across my dining room table. The symptom progression strongly suggests arsenic poisoning, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd testified in dozens of criminal cases. The timeline is textbook, gradual accumulation followed by rapid organ failure. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in Helen's metaphorical coffin. But the most satisfying discovery came from my systematic canvassing of the neighborhood's security systems. Mrs. Patterson, from 3 houses down, had a high-definition camera system that captured the entire street. The footage was crystal clear. Helen's BMW arriving at 11:47 p.m., her figure moving deliberately toward my garage, the tools glinting in the streetlight. Camera 3 shows her clearly working under your car hood, the security company technician confirmed, freezing the frame at the perfect angle. Timestamp is exact, and the resolution leaves no doubt about identity. By the 5th day, I had assembled an overwhelming case against Helen. Financial motive, means, opportunity, and expert testimony all pointed toward her guilt in both Martin's murder and the attempt on my life. Tom's mechanical analysis remained the crown jewel of evidence, professional sabotage designed to cause fatal accidents, documented with photographs and technical specifications that would convince any jury. I sat in my study that evening, surrounded by folders containing Helen's financial desperation, medical evidence of Martin's poisoning, security footage of her sabotage attempt, and expert testimony supporting every accusation. My phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "District Attorney wants to meet tomorrow. Bring everything." The legal machinery was finally grinding into motion. Helen had calculated every detail of her murderous scheme, except for one crucial factor: a father's determination to seek justice for his son. Martin's warning from beyond the grave had saved my life and exposed his killer. Now it was time to ensure she paid the full price for her crimes. I gathered the evidence files into my briefcase, preparing for what would be Helen's final day of freedom. Helen's house sat in an affluent suburb 20 minutes from downtown Chicago, its manicured lawn and circular driveway showcasing the lifestyle she'd been desperate to maintain. 2 luxury cars gleamed in the morning sun, a BMW and a Mercedes, both likely financed with credit she couldn't afford. I parked across the street and walked deliberately to her front door, carrying the manila envelope that would end her freedom forever. The court documents felt substantial in my hands: arrest warrants, civil lawsuit papers, and a comprehensive evidence summary that detailed every aspect of her criminal conspiracy. Helen answered the door in an expensive silk robe, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. When she saw me standing on her doorstep, the color drained from her face like water from a broken glass. "What do you want?" Her voice carried a tremor that belied her attempt at confident indignation. "Official court summons for attempted murder charges." I handed her the envelope with ceremonial precision. Also included are civil lawsuit documents for inheritance fraud and emotional distress. She stared at the papers as if they were written in hieroglyphics. "You can't prove anything. This is harassment. Video footage from 3 different security cameras showing you sabotaging my vehicle. Technical analysis from a certified automotive expert. Medical testimony indicating arsenic poisoning. Financial records showing your $200,000 debt motive." Each piece of evidence hit her like a physical blow. Helen clutched the doorframe for support, her expensive facade crumbling in real time. "The district attorney has accepted the case for prosecution," I continued with professional calm. "Trial date is set for next month. I thought you deserved personal notification. I'll destroy you in court." She stepped forward aggressively, but her silk slippers on the marble threshold made the gesture pathetic rather than threatening. "You'll never prove I hurt Martin. Dr. Sarah Williams will testify about arsenic poisoning symptoms. Marcus Chen will present your financial desperation. Tom Riley will explain how professional automotive sabotage works." I kept my voice steady, letting the facts speak for themselves. The evidence speaks quite clearly. Helen's eyes darted around her expensive neighborhood, perhaps calculating whether any neighbors were witnessing her public humiliation. The morning sun highlighted every line of panic etched across her carefully maintained features. "You think you've won?" Her voice rose to a near shriek. "I'll appeal everything. I'll tie this up in court for years." "You already destroyed yourself, Helen. This just makes it official." She clutched the legal documents against her chest like armor that might somehow protect her from the consequences of her actions. But we both knew the truth. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing, and no amount of designer clothing or expensive lawyers could rebuild it. "Martin warned me about you," I said quietly. "I should have listened sooner." Helen slammed the door with enough force to rattle the expensive glass panels. Through the window, I could see her sinking onto the marble floor, still clutching the papers that would send her to prison. I walked back to my car with measured steps, feeling the weight of Martin's presence like a guiding hand on my shoulder. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was an unstoppable legal machine grinding toward its inevitable conclusion. 3 weeks later, Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the verdict that echoed through the packed Chicago courtroom. "Helen Jordan, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment without possibility of parole for attempted murder and inheritance fraud." The gavel's final strike marked the end of Helen's freedom and the beginning of true justice for Martin's memory. I stood as reporters surged forward, their questions blending into a cacophony of vindication. "Justice has prevailed," I told the gathered media outside the courthouse steps. "My son can finally rest in peace, knowing his killer has been held accountable." Helen's conviction made headlines across Illinois. The wealthy widow who poisoned her husband and tried to murder her father-in-law became a cautionary tale about greed's ultimate consequences. She would spend the next decade and a half in maximum security, her expensive lifestyle replaced by prison uniforms and institutional meals. But my real satisfaction came not from her punishment, but from transforming Martin's legacy into something positive. The Martin Jordan Cancer Research Foundation launched 6 months after the trial, funded entirely by the inheritance Helen had killed to claim. Your $40 million donation will fund breakthrough research for decades, Dr. Elizabeth Hart announced at the foundation's groundbreaking ceremony. Lives will be saved because of your son's vision and your generosity. Standing before the assembled medical researchers and community leaders, I felt Martin's presence more strongly than ever. His innovative spirit would live on through the foundation's work, protecting others from the disease that made him vulnerable to Helen's poison. I'd downsized to a comfortable but modest home near Lake Michigan, keeping only what brought genuine happiness. The rest of my energy went toward travel and charitable work, visiting cancer research facilities, meeting with patient families, ensuring Martin's money created hope rather than destruction. Garrett still checked on me regularly. Our friendship deepened by the shared experience of neighborhood vigilance, saving lives. Tom had become more than a mechanic. He was a trusted ally who'd helped expose attempted murder through professional expertise. Edward handled the foundation's legal affairs, ensuring every dollar reached its intended purpose. We'd built something lasting from tragedy, transforming Helen's greed into a force for healing and discovery. 1 year after the trial, I visited Martin's grave with news of the Foundation's first research breakthrough, a promising treatment protocol that might save hundreds of lives annually. Son, I kept my promise, I whispered to the granite marker bearing his name. Your killer faced justice, and your legacy helps others fight the battle you couldn't win. From tragedy had come purpose. From loss had emerged hope. Helen's attempt to destroy our family had instead created something beautiful and enduring, a testament to love conquering greed, justice prevailing over evil, and a father's determination to honor his son's memory. The inheritance she'd killed for now funded the research that might have saved Martin's life. In the end, that seemed like the perfect form of poetic justice. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.